these people that were with Ezra would be explaining to the people, either translating for them or explaining to them what they had just heard. Another interesting thing about this is sometimes we may wonder to ourselves why we do the things we do in the church. Why do we read a text and then have it explained to us? Why does the minister or the pastor stand behind a pulpit? And the majority of the time, the reasons that we do the things we do come straight from the Scriptures. As you remember hearing here from Nehemiah in chapter 8, Ezra stood on a wooden platform that they had made for the purpose of the reading of the scrolls. Hence, we have a wooden platform here. A lot of the things that we do in the church come directly from the Scriptures and the Old Testament Scriptures. So all of that being said, Jesus stood up to read, and he was handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. And when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And that sitting down was also very common in the synagogues of that day. And I was visiting with one of the brothers earlier this week, and that subject, I asked about that subject as well. He had taken a trip to Scandinavia and found out that in some of the prayer houses that Laestadius had been in and his people preached in from the beginning of our movement back in the 1800s, that's what would happen. They would stand up, they would read the message, and then they would sit down and expound upon it. Just like is written here in the book of Luke. Just what Jesus did. And this portion that he reads from comes from what we know as the 61st chapter of Isaiah, which is part of what's known as the Messianic part of Isaiah, which goes from chapters 40 through chapters 66. And it points forward to the coming of the Messiah, to the coming kingdom, to what was going to be. And the first of all, and this first part that he's reading from has a reference way back to the book of Leviticus and what was known as from the law as the year of Jubilee. Some of you may remember that term and may have read about it at some point, especially if you've gone through the Bible in a year or done one of those type of programs. When you get through Leviticus, it can be some very tedious reading. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, when the law is given and you read about all that stuff, you can get pretty bogged down in it. But one of the great things that you do read about it in chapter 25 of Leviticus is you get to read all about this year of Jubilee, this great celebration that's supposed to happen every 50 years. And during that year, every Israelite was to be allowed to take back the land of his family. And they were all supposed to forgive each other's debts. They weren't supposed to sow or reap from the land, but they were supposed to let it rest. And if they lended money or lent money to anybody during that year, they weren't supposed to charge any interest. The people that were in prison during that time were supposed to be released, regardless of the length of their sentence that was left. And it was also to be a year in which special care would be taken to the poor, to the widows, to those that were less fortunate than you were. It was supposed to be a tremendous time of celebration